Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining Your Hour with APA Virginia, sponsored by the Berkeley Group. As people trickle in, I'm going to give everybody a couple seconds before we get started. Thank you for being with us. All right, it is noon, so we will get started. Again, thank you for joining our monthly webinar series, Your Hour with APA Virginia, sponsored by the Berkeley Group. We appreciate their continued support in making this possible. It is hosted the fourth Monday of each month from noon to 1 o'clock. As always, we are recording this session and it will be posted to our YouTube page within 24 to 48 hours. So you can always find that here on Your Hour with APA Virginia's YouTube page. All information about CM credits, whether you're watching it live or watching it recorded, are always posted in the comments on the YouTube page. As always, a couple quick housekeeping reminders. We will take questions at the end, but throughout the session, we encourage you to enter your questions in the Q&A box. We also encourage you to communicate not only with panelists and with other attendees through the chat box function. We'll take those questions at the end. Also, if you'd like to ask your question live, you can use the raise your hand icon. And at the end, when we move into Q&A, we'll call on you and you'll be able to unmute and turn your camera on as you feel is most appropriate and ask your question live to our presenters. As always, we're always looking for new ideas for webinar topics. And if you have one that you've seen or you're interested in presenting, please feel free to email admin@apavirginia.com. Also, one quick announcement you may have already seen, but we have our upcoming conference, which normally pre-COVID was a July event, but we've split it in two. So we're doing a virtual 2-day conference, July 19th and 20th. And then we're doing a part 2 in person, but we'll also have a hybrid portion, October 21st and 22nd at the Hotel Roanoke. For those who attend the virtual conference, you'll get a 20% discount on the October portion. And if you're attending both, our guarantee to our members is the cost will remain the same and not go any higher than the 2019 conference in Hampton. To register and find out more information about that, you can go to apavirginia.com. So this month's webinar, A Pathway for Protecting and Increasing Affordable Housing Inventory, the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust, is presented by Daryl Neer, the CEO of Fauquier Habitat for Humanity and board chair of the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust, and Erica Sims, president of HD Advisors. If you've registered, I'm just going to assume you've read the description of the webinar, so I'm not going to waste any more time reading that aloud, but I'm going to hand it over at this point to Erica and Daryl to share their screen and move on with the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Excellent. Let me do this slideshow. Beautiful.
Looks great.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daryl Neer, and I am the CEO for Fauquier Habitat. Joined Fauquier Habitat 2.5 years ago. And at that time, we were, as an affiliate, we were restarting. We hadn't really had any builds for a couple of years, and we were really needing to rethink how we do the work of Habitat. And so in this conversation today, talking about the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust, I want to provide you a little bit of context for how we arrived at where we are today with the launch of the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust. And joining me today is Erica Sims, and I can't say enough about Erica and her partnership with Fauquier Habitat in so much of the work that we've been doing. And Erica, do you want to do a brief introduction for yourself before we start off?
Sure, thanks, Daryl. HD Advisors is an affordable housing consulting firm, and the work we're focusing on today is our work in community land trusts that we are really honored to be working with Daryl and the rest of the Habitat Virginia community on bringing more affordable housing opportunities to the state of Virginia.
Yeah. So I start off that this is downtown Warrenton, Virginia, where we're headquartered, and Fauquier Habitat represents 2 counties in our service area. Fauquier County and Rappahannock County, which if you're familiar with both, high property costs, high median average income, high cost for single family homes that enter the marketplace, and high rentals prices. And in entering into this situation, just for a little bit of background about Habitat, I'm sure you've heard about us. We have really based around the premise of how do we ensure that everyone has a safe, decent, and affordable place to live? And one of the myths that we continually confront is the belief that somehow we give away houses, and which we don't. We try to provide a pathway to home ownership. And one of our challenges as Habitat has been we will place families in homes. They build equity over time, and then the house will go up for sale. And in most Habitat affiliates across the state of Virginia and across the country, there's a right of first refusal. But sometimes the rate of increase of value and the equity that's gained because of fair market value, it's just impossible to repurchase the home. And so what happens is we build an affordable home, and then it leaves the affordability and the affordable inventory of a service area and becomes a fair market value home. And so you're always chasing the tail of trying to address affordability in the areas that you serve. And so that was one of our primary questions when I came here 2.5 years ago. And, just looking across the street, just give you a sense, that's downtown Warrenton that you just saw, just about 3 blocks away. This is across the street, Ava Walker Park, which is a wonderful part of the community. People gather. 3 blocks away, this is historic High Street, just a beautiful neighborhood with historic homes. But in between Ava Walker Park, downtown Warrenton, and historic High Street lies historic Haiti Street. And this has been our focus neighborhood for almost 4 years. And we do have a history on Haiti Street with Habitat, building Habitat homes over the 30 years of our history. But Haiti Street was built initially in the late 1800s. And is a historically African-American neighborhood. And what's happened over the years, homes were built, were historic and deteriorated, and to the point where we find ourselves today. A number of the homes had been abandoned. A lot of them had been transitioned into rentals that through benign neglect became substandard rentals within our community. However, here's what's happening. This house just sold with very minimal investment for $325,000, and it's about 1,300 square feet. It's on Haiti Street, and where Haiti Street is located, high pressures for gentrification, and this is just one of the examples. And so what we had done is to develop out a model and a plan for how can we protect what has been a historically African-American neighborhood, a neighborhood that is, for the most part, some of the less expensive rentals, as well as lower price single-family homes. And what we ended up doing is we approached the Path Foundation here in our community and laid out a plan of action that included the work that we were doing with HD Advisors. And thank you to Virginia Housing for the community impact grant that they provided for us to be able to hire HD Advisors. And we ended up acquiring several parcels. Total properties, 11 properties representing 19 units of housing. The total value of the properties that we acquired costed about $1.7 million, and it's a 28% footprint on the Haiti Street neighborhood. And why was this so important for us? Well, I mean, I give the list over here. One was the once in a lifetime opportunity. It was very unlikely the ability to acquire so many affordable housing parcels within a dense neighborhood in the downtown Warrenton would be difficult. We did have an existing Habitat footprint in the neighborhood, and we wanted to make sure that we working with the neighborhood, and that relationship had been developing over 4.5 years to build trust within the neighborhood, so people would see that we're living in the neighborhood, that we weren't going in just to flip houses. This was about an investment in a community within a neighborhood, and how do we revitalize an affordable neighborhood in Warrenton and avoid the properties becoming full market rate housing. We also know in the habitat model, there's this really a transformational and generational change that takes place in the importance of housing, whether it be in a family's health, their economic stability, the educational stability of their kids. And being able to do this again in such a focused neighborhood is really important. And the other part is we're trying to do things differently as Habitat here in Fauquier County. You'll know that many habitats rely on almost a volunteer only type of build structure. But in Fauquier County and Rappahannock County, we do not have the population that can do multiple housing based around the volunteer model. And so we were looking at how can we approach this in a way that we can scale and service not only Fauquier County, but how could we do scaling in Rappahannock County and perhaps provide a model for other habitats to adopt. And this includes a lot of this, instead of raising money up front for the full build, which many habitat affiliates do, we're using debt funding. And we know the cost of our builds, use the debt funding to be able to pay off the interest over the time of that construction loan. And on the back end, when we close a mortgage with a family, we know that our subsidy within that property will fall anywhere between $20,000 to $70,000 of our construction costs. And it gives more predictability, and it provides us to be able to build more homes all at once with the money that we're raising for the mission of Habitat. But the most important part here that isn't on this map is we were committed to finding a way to, how can we ensure the affordable housing that we build could stay affordable for the duration of the lifetime of that home? So we're no longer chasing the tail of that affordable inventory that every community, I think, across the state and across this country is trying to build up. And the model that we wanted to pursue and investigate was the permanent affordability model that's provided through a land trust. And what started as a land trust for Fauquier Habitat in conversations with Habitat Virginia, Habitat for Humanity of Northern Virginia, we thought, well, why, if we're investing this type of money investment in a land trust, could we serve more? Is a statewide land trust viable? And that's where we started that conversation with Erica at HD Advisors about, can we pull this off? And we'll let Erica talk a little bit about the land trust model. And just as we officially announced that the land trust is operational just a couple of weeks ago, and we're really excited that not only will Fauquier Habitat be placing its first homes within the land trust coming up this fall, we'll be placing 2, if not 3 homes this fall. All of our future homes will be in the land trust, and we hope that other Habitat affiliates and affordable housing providers can utilize this resource. Erica?
Thank you. And I think, Martina, we'd like to go ahead before I start and do our poll, which will give folks an opportunity to let us know how familiar you are with this concept, community land trusts. And while we wait for those poll results to come in, I'll say community land trusts have been around for many decades. There are over 300 around the country, but there are only a few in Virginia. And this new statewide community land trust is very unique. It's the only statewide community land trust initiated by Habitat for Humanity in the country. And it's one of a few statewide community land trusts. All right, so that is a sort of not unsurprising response, which is, I know CLTs, I know they're about affordable home ownership, but I don't know the nitty gritty. And so what I'd really like to do with my presentation today, and Daryl, you can advance the 4 bullets on this slide, So I can do this slide. What I'd really like to have you leave today's conversation with is an understanding of how Vsclt might be a useful tool to you in your jurisdiction or to other organizations in your jurisdiction. So generally, not technically, but to start off generally, what does a community land trust do? It's a way to make a affordable home affordable for generations, to not just build a single affordable home that serves one family, but that can serve subsequent families. And there's a legal mechanism that we will go into in more detail that allows that permanent affordability to be created. And when you create that permanent affordability, you expand the benefit of this affordable home you create from the individual to the entire community. So now your community has a community asset, which is an affordable home forever. So especially in a real estate market that I'm sure all of you are experiencing, regardless of where you're dialing in from today, the market is making it incredibly difficult for a large swath of people in our communities to access homeownership, not just the lowest income members of our community, but a wide range. And this type of housing can ensure that forever in our neighborhoods, there is some subset of homes that are permanently affordable. And that can be an incredible asset to a community, creating permanently mixed income neighborhoods. And this type of housing for the individual is a stepping stone to market rate housing. This is not the end all and be all type of housing. This is a way to give an opportunity, a leg up to a family to come into this type of housing, earn not all the equity they possibly could, but some equity, and then be able to move on to a fee simple home and continue to pursue that wealth building opportunity. So you can go on to the next slide, Daryl. This next slide is a way for us to show you the structure of how the legal mechanism works for a community land trust. So this community land trust sells the home on a property to an income qualified buyer. And in many cases, you'll see that be a buyer earning 80% of the area median income or less. And when they go to sell the home, they receive less than the full appreciation for that home. The home's future value, the resale value, the value that the buyer can sell the home for is restricted, and it is restricted in a legal document called the Ground Lease. And that is a lease between the community land trust, which on the bottom left-hand corner here, you can see that the community land trust retains ownership of the land. And so is in that way able to enter into this ground lease where they are in a legal agreement with the homeowner. And in that ground lease, they're able to dictate a number of things, but primarily what the future resale price for the home will be. And there are many ways to set that future resale price, but the bottom line is it's always going to be less than the future market rate for the home. And in that way, you are ensuring that this buyer will leave this home with increased wealth, that they will see some benefit of the appreciation over time that any homeowner experiences in a home, but they will not leave with all of it. They will leave some of the increase in value in the home. And so the home can be resold to another income qualified buyer at an affordable price. And so Vsclt, the statewide community land trust, has a model ground lease, and it actually has 4 different versions of it, depending on the type of market in which it's operating around the state. And that ground lease will ensure the permanent affordability for these homes, and that the home will always be sold to an income qualified buyer at an affordable price. We'll go on to the next slide. So in this slide, I just want to get into some of the nitty-gritty financial details, because this is really where I think a lot of people are able to understand what's happening here. So bear with me while I spend a few minutes going through all of these numbers so we can really understand what the dynamics are financially in a CLT home. So if you look at the top of this graph, you see in the upper left-hand corner, you see a home that starts in year one with a market price of $330,000. So this is similar to the homes that Daryl was describing in his community in Warrenton. So you have a home that starts in year one as market price of $330,000, and that top green line, the top of this graph is showing you what happens to that home over time, over 30 years of market appreciation. And you can see it's not linear. There's some years over time wherein that home decreases in value, like a 2008, 2007 kind of scenario. And there are other times when it grows modestly, and there are other times where it grows very intensely. But over the long run, it will increase in value. And so this home hypothetically increases in value so that 30 years later, it's valued at $532,000. Now switch down to the blue section. Daryl's Habitat for Humanity, as the example here, builds this home that's valued at $330,000, but sells it at a very affordable price. They raise the grant funds to sell it at $170,000 to an income qualified buyer. And that buyer enters into the ground lease, and this home is in the community land trust. And that ground lease sets a different formula for how the price will increase. So it says, over time, your home is going to increase in value, but by year 30, it will have increased in value to $261,000. And now someone may leave this home before year 30. They may leave in year 5, then they may leave in year 10, then they may leave in year 20. But the bottom line is over time, this is the trajectory of the way this home's value would increase. And so that at the end of those 30 years, you can see the growing difference between the market price and the CLT price. So in that way, the CLT home is retaining more and more of the affordability over time. In year one, the difference between the market price and the CLT price was $160,000, but by year 30, that difference is $270,000. So that means that when Daryl raises the funds in year one so that he can bring this home to market at $170,000, those funds that he's raised increase in value over time, so that by the end of this period of time, he has increased their value to $270,000. So in this way, you create a lasting benefit and a lasting subsidy for this community that grows over time. And this section all the way at the bottom of the chart is to help us understand what the homeowner in that CLT home sees in terms of increased equity over time. So obviously, if the homeowner had bought the CLT at that $170,000 CLT price at the beginning, and then was able to sell it at market rate over time, they would see a massive increase in equity because they would jump from the blue all the way up to the green. But instead, by being in the community land trust, they see a much more modest but sizable amount of equity that grows over time. So in this hypothetical, if the person were to be there for the full 30 years, they would see $91,000 in equity growth over that time. If they left in interim years, the question is, if they had $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in equity growth over their time in this home, would that be sufficient to move them into a fee simple home? And that's really the focus for the Community Land Trust, is again, being this stepping stone to home ownership, enabling each household that comes into the home to then be able to move on into fee simple home ownership. So we can go on to the next slide. And I did notice someone mentioned the numbers on the axis do seem to be incorrect. So thank you for that. We'll update that. So I wanted to spend a moment here since we're talking to planners today. And I wanted to spend a moment talking about how CLTs benefit the community. We just spent a lot of time talking about how the numbers work and what money comes to the individual, what money stays in the home, how those benefits are accrued. But there are also benefits in community land trusts housing that accrue to the community as a whole. First and foremost, one of the most obvious reasons that neighborhoods and communities are attracted to CLT structures is the prevention of gentrification. Having a set of homes in a neighborhood that are not going to flip and become completely unaffordable to large swaths of our community, to have a permanent group of homes that are moving at just a different trajectory in terms of where they're headed in value. And so CLTs are first and foremost a gentrification tool. They are also just an affordable housing tool. So this is a way to retain, as Daryl said, that pool of homes that affordable housing developers create so that they are not just a one-time benefit to an individual household, but we could collectively in the state of Virginia grow our pool of affordable homeownership homes by using a community land trust and have an increasing pool of properties rather than what we have today, which is a decreasing pool of properties. Groups like Daryl's cannot keep up because costs continue to rise. They cannot keep up even with replacing the amount of affordable homes that have been built in the past. Thirdly, and we talked a little bit about this in the chart, your subsidy dollars last longer. The subsidy placed into the home on day one to make it affordable can be retained over time. And so funders and local jurisdictions that have housing funding really find this attractive because it's a way to make those scarce dollars go further. And the fourth on here is a benefit that community land trusts can provide to neighborhoods that are either on the decline value-wise, or maybe just have a much less positive market currently in terms of home values. Community land trusts can stabilize neighborhoods because they are an investment into a neighborhood. They are bringing affordable homeownership, renovating properties in neighborhoods, and can really stabilize and create a new pool of homeowners in a neighborhood that may see declining values or may see a real significant rise in renters. We can go on to the next slide. So why did we create Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust? Currently, there are 2 community land trusts operating in Virginia, one in Charlottesville and one in the Richmond region. There is a lot of interest around the state from different jurisdictions, particularly in Northern Virginia, around creating new community land trusts. But creating a new community land trust means creating an entirely new 501c3. It means developing the bylaws and articles of incorporation. It also means developing that ground lease, that fundamental document that governs how community land trusts operate legally. And so there is a lot of work in creating a community land trust, and there's a lot of work in operating one because you're creating a permanent set of assets that have to be managed and maintained. Every time someone comes to sell a home, that ground lease has to be reviewed, the new buyer needs to be income qualified, and the home needs to be sold at the appropriate price for both the seller and the buyer. So there's a tremendous amount of asset management that happens. And that's why we created Vsclt. Vsclt is a tool, and we are hoping that this is going to be a tool for the entire state, for any nonprofit, for any habitat affiliate, for any local jurisdiction that would be interested in having CLT homes within their portfolio, they could make use of Vsclt sort of as this tool for them to use and not have to recreate. So Vsclt maintains a menu of master ground leases. Vsclt has a staff that understands and has operated CLTs and can help new buyers understand it, can help organizations understand it, and can help market CLTs. The staff of the CLT also asset manages all of these properties. And lastly, oversees compliance of that ground lease. And so there are nominal fees baked into each transaction for a CLT home that will support Virginia statewide CLT, but this is a lean 501c3 operated by Habitat for Humanity that can be a tool that many organizations and jurisdictions around the state can benefit from. So we can go on to the next slide. So I wanted to stop here and discuss the question of how does Vsclt benefit housing developers? Whether you are a market rate housing developer who is planning to build a few affordable homes in your development, or you are a nonprofit housing developer intending to build affordable homes in your community, Vsclt can support you in that work. We can pre-qualify your home buyers. We can explain CLT homeownership to them. We have a set of pro bono attorneys that will work with that prospective home buyer to make sure they really understand the ground lease and the terms of this arrangement. The Vsclt will assist you in asset managing the home in the long run. So for example, the ground lease discusses how this home must be your permanent residence. It must be your primary residence. And it can't be rented out for rental income. And so if it came to be known that a home was in violation of that term of the ground lease, Vsclt could assist the local organization with adhering to compliance with that ground lease. If a developer is currently for-profit or nonprofit, if a developer is currently anticipating building affordable housing in their projects, this is a way to take that exact same housing and make it permanent. And it's doesn't require substantially different funding for the project, and it can really extend the life of the funding in your project. And if you're looking for a way to increase the funding of your project, oftentimes describing this new mechanism and including it in your project can be a way to increase funding that folks are interested in providing for your project. So who are we? Vsclt, as Daryl said, was created when a number of Habitat for Humanity affiliates thought about creating community land trusts and decided to come together to create a single one so that the benefits and the economies and the sort of time saving and cost saving could be shared. Fauquier Habitat for Humanity and Northern Virginia Habitat for Humanity are two of the founding affiliates that are that have properties that are actively being moved into the Community Land Trust. Habitat Virginia, while not developing any homes exclusively themselves, are really working on recruiting other Habitat affiliates around the state to participate. My firm, HD Advisors, manages the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust in Richmond, and we also serve as the staff for this Vsclt. And then Lane Pearson with Fleckenstein and Associates is the attorney for this project. And the next slide helps you understand how you can participate. So If you are interested in learning more about this and how it might serve a Habitat affiliate or other organization in your community, you can reach out to either Daryl or myself. Our contact information is on the last slide in this deck. We can share with you more information about the ground leases that we have in this menu of ground leases. We have a website, vsclt.org, that has a number of documents on it that are sort of explainers of the program. As Daryl mentioned, the organization just launched publicly in the last week or two. And as you get more familiar with this, the next step in pursuing this work would be to discuss inclusion of your pipeline in the CLT and how we would coordinate what we would do in terms of orienting you and your buyers versus what work that you would do. You know, we do the development of the homes. We don't do the construction or the land acquisition. So there's a little bit of negotiation of roles and responsibilities that can take place, and we can kind of help you understand how we would work together. And then the last step is to enter into an MOU that kind of outlines those roles or responsibilities. And it doesn't necessarily obligate you to something, but really helps us understand how we would work together moving forward. And so I think that is the last slide. I did see a few questions come in, and here is our contact information, and feel free to reach out to either of us. I think, I know Daryl mentioned this, or Martina mentioned it at the top. Daryl is the board chair of this new Vsclt, and so we'd both be happy to answer any questions.
All right, we have a couple that have come in. First one from Aaron Moore. This seems really awesome, or low or moderate income housing, but is there a way CLTs can be accessible to extremely low income households who make less than 30% area median income?
So if I could talk about it just from Habitat for Humanity's perspective and how we're working with families that are under 30%. If you remember in the slide that I was talking about Haiti Street, we have several rental units that are on the street. And what our goal is to look at any of the rental properties that we have and provide an opportunity to get people into a position for home ownership. And a lot of times the families that we end up working with that are in our rental situations, we're the only avenue that they have to be able to rent a property because of income constraints or existing debt obligations that they just don't qualify within our area. And so what we did in our acquisition of the properties on Haiti Street, we immediately reduced our overall rental prices to prices that were affordable. So for example, we took some of the rents down from $900 to $500 to be able to provide some stability for individuals who are currently renting from us. And then standing up and working in the neighborhood on a variety of different programming that will help individuals who are ready to participate to get themselves in a position to buy homes that are Habitat or otherwise.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd say that this can work for any income level, and I'm going to look for a great report that was just issued by a national organization talking about using CLTs for this very purpose, very low income, under 30%, because there are a number of CLTs around the country that actually own rental properties that are either tax credit rental properties or other affordable rental properties. But if you can figure out the way to bring the home to market, you can add CLT onto it. And so the hurdles for creating very low income CLT are just the same as creating very low income affordable. And so there definitely are huge hurdles, the main one being that it costs a lot of extra money. But the addition of the CLT does not add a cost to the creation of that unit, and it can definitely be a huge benefit.
All right, our next question is, do CLTs buy homes at market rate? How do they purchase these homes, and where are the initial costs of the new homes absorbed? Are these initial costs ever recovered?
So I can answer that. So CLTs, in terms of acquisitions and in terms of the creation of an affordable home, operate like any other affordable housing developer. They have to get access to the land, and whether they get low cost land through a local jurisdiction or organization donating land, or whether they have to go out and buy market rate land or a market rate house to rehab, those costs are the same as any other affordable housing developer. And that means that they have, just like any other affordable housing developer, they have to find the subsidy that it takes to cover all of those costs and bring the affordable home to the market. So I'm not sure if you have anything else to add to that, Daryl.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we do will have a subsidy, a philanthropic subsidy involved with it. What's been very heartening in moving to the CLT models when we talk to our donors, and Erica alluded to this about the stewardship of dollars in the subsidy going over time. For example, if we're putting in a $70,000 subsidy into a home, really that subsidy, and we're built it because the CLT actually helps us justify investing more in our construction costs. That subsidy, $70,000 subsidy, is a $700 a year subsidy that goes into the building of the home. And so that really has been something that is attractive to our donors who are entering into this process. And the other piece, in terms of the houses that we sell, we serve 30 to 60% of area median income. Our base income is approximately $34,000 a year. And that ability and what that subsidy is, it shifts over just depending upon income, obviously. And there's because I saw this question there earlier, someone was asking about the cost of land. Our philosophical position on this has been, we know that cost of land is our sort of affiliate subsidy into the process. And so we do not build this in, it's not built into the cost of our construction. And what we end up doing is actually doing only the improvement on that property for the value of the home. And I think that there's another piece in the cost of the property compared to traditional property taxes. And Erica, you could probably speak more to this. But because the home is in a land trust, its valuation cannot be full market value, and it should be assessed at its affordable mortgage price. And so the property taxes that what we were realizing here in Fauquier County, sometimes property taxes over time have been more than the actual principal being paid on the mortgage. And by moving us into a land trust model, we're able to control that by connecting the property tax valuation to the actual affordable mortgage.
All right. Our next question is, can you expand on why you think CLTs will prevent gentrification? Since preventing gentrification is about preserving an existing culture, how do you ensure that the people buying the CLT homes have the same cultural desires as the existing neighbors? It seems like assuming that everyone in the same economic situation has the same vision for the street you mentioned as an example.
That was a lot of information. I'd love to hear. I think, Martina, you had suggested or offered that people could come off mute and.
Sure. Let me see if
I
Brian...
can start with
Brian, I'm going to give you the ability. It's Brian Sweats. Brian, I'm going to give you the ability to unmute, and maybe you can ask your question live. Let's see if we can get him off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was wondering why there's an assumption that everyone in the same economic group that could afford these CLTs would have the same desires for their neighborhood. It strikes me that people who are buying in could want different things than the people who live there, which would then allow for the possibility of gentrification. So I was just wondering if you could kind of explain why you think that this would help prevent gentrification.
So I guess, we could debate what we mean by gentrification, and I could concede that my terminology is inaccurate. But when I say that it prevents gentrification, what I mean is it prevents sort of uniform price changes in a neighborhood, so that you have a neighborhood that maybe was modestly priced or had a variety of prices, and over time becomes almost exclusively high priced. And so that's really all I'm talking about when it comes to gentrification. Now, if one of the things your question makes me think of is the issue of race, which is very obviously tied into gentrification and is also really tied into community land trusts. So community land trusts actually got their start in Georgia, actually around the exact same time that Habitat for Humanity got its start in the 1960s in a sort of civil rights era set of collectives in Georgia. And the idea started with the New Communities Community Land Trust in Georgia was a Black-run community land trust focused on Black farmers retaining ownership of their land for farming and affordable homeownership. And so the idea is to take a portfolio of homes off the market and retain them in community control. And one of the things that we did not talk about on this presentation today is that built into the CLT model is that a third of the people on the board of the land trust are homeowners in the land trust. And in that way, what you're trying to do is create a pool of homes in a community that are truly community controlled and no longer are an asset just for the market and for whoever can afford them, but can really be dictated by this group. And so you mentioned in your comment that you may have different goals for the people who are existing in a neighborhood and the people who are incoming, and that's definitely the case, and CLTs are not immune to that, but CLTs have an opportunity to kind of put a pause button on the intense cycling of neighborhoods and markets and say, what do we want in these homes in terms of price points? Who do we want to serve? Do we want these to be places where families can live because they have sufficient bedroom size and they have yards, fenced in yards? Do we want to be sure that Black buyers in the neighborhood are actively marketed to and are able to purchase these homes? How do we make sure that our portfolio of homes are purchased equitably? So those are all the kind of things that CLTs take up as they develop their programs, and they really have an opportunity to be a lot more conscientious about the housing that they provide and how it's used, because they no longer are only selling it for the highest price.
Eric, if I could also talk about the cultural component from a habitat perspective. When we select partner families, we select partner families not for properties, but for program. And excuse me, and that program is a 15-month program that covers everything from understanding your finances, understanding the mortgage process, home repair, lawn maintenance, being a good neighbor, conflict management, just a whole range of classes that are offered. It also contains a sweat equity component where families are putting in at least 250 hours of sweat equity. But we have a marker within that process where once a family fulfills, each adult in the family hits 150 hours of sweat equity, they get to choose the lots that they're a part of. Right. And so while it doesn't completely address the issue that you raised, Brian, but what we do find, and this is our first cycle in with building homes on Haiti Street, as well as a couple of other parcels within Fauquier County, people are self-selecting into the neighborhoods that they want to be a part of. And the work that we're doing within the neighborhood, combined with the work that we're doing with our partner families who are exposed to the neighborhoods that we are working in, there's that component where people understand where they're going to live and choosing to where they're lived. They're not just placed on an individual property.
All right, we have another question, please. And we've gotten several questions, and the reality is we probably won't get to all of them, but what I will do is provide all of the questions to our speakers to follow up with attendees after the webinar. Please elaborate on how property maintenance is handled. Is it solely the responsibility of the leasee to maintain the property, buildings and grounds, or does the CLT have a role in it?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's something that and we were just talking about this before we went on into this webinar. Part of what we're setting up is what is the best way to provide mechanisms for home maintenance, right? And so yes, it does fall on the homeowner, but what we're trying to do is how can we give homeowners who are working within our program a leg up on that process? Because people are entering in either to newly refurbished homes, renovated homes, or new construction, right? And so we provide a warranty up front that provides any sort of support initially. But what we're discussing is, how do we partner our critical home repair program to help support those homeowners who need repairs, as well as can we utilize some of the money that is paid into the purchasing of the home, the money that we recoup, funneling a portion back into a dedicated account for that homeowner that would earn interest over time, that would be dedicated specifically to home repairs that they can utilize. And so the structure of the land lease puts the home repair responsibilities onto the homeowner, but we're trying to figure out ways, how do we best subsidize people and help them in that transition into home ownership to best prepare and support them in that process.
Great. Our next question is, are you looking for this to replace locally focused CLTs? I just lost the question, like Maggie Walker, or how do you see them working in concert with statewide CLT, and would Vsclt become the owners of the land?
I think we see Vsclt operating in places that don't currently have local community land trusts. And I know, Kim, you're working on one down in Blacksburg, I believe. I'd love to hear what the status is of that, but this is really something that's more for the parts of the state that don't yet have anything developed. And how much kind of work it takes to stand something like this up. And that's really the point here, is to offer this as an option for places that don't want to stand one up locally. There may be a lot of reasons why localities want to stand up their own. But what we tried to create here was something that could really give localities and individual organizations all the benefits of standing up their own, like a lot of control and autonomy and flexibility, while not having to take on some of the legwork.
Martina, I saw a question that Anthony DeLucia, I think I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, asking the question and pointing out that that talking about addressing the disparity of wealth in superstar areas that are of high income, high wealth, high property value, and how do you address that disparity? And one of the parts that that we're looking to do is partner with developers who are coming into the community, because the town of Warrenton has been an incredible partner in this, and in the recent comprehensive plan have made affordability a priority, have emphasized Haiti Street in particular for affordability. But where we're looking at, and we've already identified a couple of partners where they're doing high market rate housing, but dedicating a percentage of their lots to habitat as part of their proposals moving forward. And we also are looking at ways that how do we access land when it comes available in those areas. And part of that is through donors. I mean, we just, there's an area just outside of the official, which was in the Warrenton service area, that we received a parcel of land that can be subdivided, we're hoping, into 3 or 4 parcels. And in that process, be bringing affordable housing into what is a high income area. And so there are mechanisms that make it possible for us to address those concerns.
One quick question I saw come in from Douglas Miles. I'm familiar with Maggie L. Walker Land Trust in RVA. What was the name of the one in Charlottesville, and is that in the city itself or in Albemarle County?
It's in the city itself, but I'm not sure if they also cover the county, but it's Thomas Jefferson Community Land Trust. And there is a question in the Q&A I would like to answer.
Absolutely.
This is from Marlo Ford, and it says, if we know that Black and Brown communities historically have earned less than their white counterparts, and if affordability is based on AMI, how many families from marginalized communities have been able to return and purchase in this community? And that is a excellent question. And I'll talk about it from the perspective of the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust in Richmond, because that community land trust has now had about 55 homes completed. And one of the stated missions of that land trust is increasing Black home ownership in Richmond. And you're right. I'll tell you something else that we see is our Black buyers and our white buyers typically come in with around the same income, but the Black buyers qualify for around, on average, $20,000 less in a home loan. And so that is something we are still unpacking, but I think we can all guess some of the reasons. Some of the reasons could just be discrimination in lending. Others are credit score, which I don't believe is a very good tool for lending and mortgage qualifying, but is used nonetheless. And another is just different debt ratios and different household characteristics. And so just like for any affordable homeownership program, not just CLTs, but any affordable homeownership program, trying to reduce the racial wealth gap and focusing on buyers of color takes targeted programs, additional resources, and a lot of intentionality. And so organizations have to be very committed and focused on that, because I do think it should be a top priority for CLTs as well as other affordable homeownership programs.
Great. And Daryl, I think a couple people have asked, or Erica, to please put the specific Vsclt web address in the chat if you could.
I just did.
It didn't pop up.
Oh, so the web address is vsclt.org. I did want to address there was a question about CLTs and aging in place. And I want to just address that briefly, because we do have a situation where a number of our families are finding themselves where they do have equity in their homes, but yet at the same time, they do not want the pressures of home ownership anymore, and they're looking for ways out. And we're trying to figure out a model or a process by which, how can we support those families? There's one woman who, she is in her 80s. She lives in a Habitat home, and she said, I'm just tired, and I need money for my for some medical needs, but I don't want to sell my home because it's a, this is where I live. And so we're trying to figure out how do we do this in a fair way to potentially purchase back the home, provide permanent tenancy at no cost, while also doing some rehabilitation on the property. And then when she does pass, then that there's money that could be potentially passed on to heirs, but then we could use it again for affordable housing in the marketplace. But the thing that we're really trying to ensure is that in no way can what we do be perceived as predatory, because that is what oftentimes is thought of in those types of programs. And so, yes, there are opportunities, but it needs to be done in the right way. And we're exploring that right now.
All right, well, if you all have any closing remarks, we're right at the hour. I, again, will remind attendees, we will share the questions that didn't get answered with our speakers for follow-up, but I've also put Erica and Daryl's emails in the chat if you all want to follow up with them directly. Erica and Daryl, do you have any closing remarks you want to share?
And the only thing I would say is that with the part about the land trust that I really love, and in the original conceptualization of what we have done with the Virginia Community Statewide Land Trust, is in many ways think about it as an umbrella parking lot. And we have a number of shared equity models that communities or organizations or developers can choose from to apply to the needs of the community. For example, for us, AMI increase over time seems to be the best way to do our shared equity. Others are looking at a percentage of fair market value. And we know that we have the capability as we grow and scale is to, if we have to change or modify, we can provide an opportunity to look at those mechanisms to incorporate them within the land trust. Because our overall goal is how do we help with the state of Virginia to increase its affordable housing inventory in perpetuity.
Right, and I would say people have had excellent questions today, and we have a growing and significant affordable housing need in our state, and a lot of the questions today, I think, were really important critiques of our program or CLTs in general. And this tool is something where we are really inviting you to come and be a full participant in developing something that can be statewide and can really scale to address some of our most urgent needs. And so I love that the questions today were really thought-provoking for me, because we need to all come together and try to take tools like this and figure out how they can come down to our individual jurisdictions and make an impact.
All right, well, thank you both for joining us, and thank you everyone who was able to participate as an attendee, and Erica and Daryl for joining us. Again, this is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube page, and all of the follow-up information can be found at apavirginia.com. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Monday, and we will see you next month. Thank you.